Well, I'm joined now by Shadow Environment Secretary Jim McMahon. A very good morning to you. So the union's asking questions over Labour's handling of the strike. So first of all, was Sir Keir Starmer right to sack the Shadow Transport Minister, Sam Tarry?
First of all, the trade unions are doing a very important job at representing working people that are really feeling the pinch after 12 years of a Tory government where the economy is stagnated and people are really feeling the squeeze now in the cost of living crisis. And so the trade unions, with that collective power of workers, is very important. And I've been a member of the trade union since I was 17 in my first job. I believe in that collective power and I believe in workers coming together. What the Labour Party needs to do is to look to the country and to convince the country that we are to be trusted with the nation's finances, that we are to be trusted with public services, and that we're to be trusted for their families. And that's about convincing them that we're ready to govern. And so the role that we're playing is about holding the government to account, of course, but it's also about looking to the country and saying there is an alternative to the Tory flatline in the economy. There is an alternative to the Tories completely stripping out our public services. And there is an alternative to a government, frankly, that is standing by during a cost of living crisis that's really hitting working people.
Well, if the unions are, as you say, good at representing working people, why is it such a bad thing for a Labour politician to show their support on the picket line?
This is not about whether somebody was on a picket line or not. It was about, as I understand it, the broadcast round that was done without authorisation. And all of us sign up to a collective responsibility on the Shadow Cabinet, and that's very important. And when that isn't followed, then the Chief Whip has to take action to ensure that discipline can be maintained. Because if we can't organise ourselves in opposition, then we can't look to the country and say that we're ready to govern. And that's the critical thing. I do not want to go to another general election to wake up on that Friday and find that the Tories have won again. We need to look to the country and show them that there is an alternative. And when it comes to being on the side of working people, listen, it was the Labour Party that right at the start of the year was calling for a windfall tax on the oil and gas giants. It's the Labour Party that voted down the national insurance increases, and it's the Labour Party that are bringing forward plans to deal with the cost of living crisis that people are going through.
But do you think the unions feel supported by Labour?
I think the trade unions, from all the relationships that I've had, and right throughout my political journey, we've always stood shoulder to shoulder with our trade union colleagues. They're an important part of the Labour family, and we have different roles to play in this. The trade unions, of course, has to organise and make sure that workers have that collective voice when they don't feel that they're being listened to. But I look to the Conservatives and say, well, where are they? Where is Grant Shapps on the rail strike, for instance, when he's completely missing in action? Instead of making it better, he's making it worse by fanning the flames. And I think the government really needs to step up now and recognise that the country is grinding to a halt under their leadership. And if they don't show leadership, we are going to head into the summer and into the winter with further industrial action and further cost of living crisis hitting households.
Well, yes, and we talked to Dave Ward of the Communication Workers Union earlier. You talk of other industrial action. He said he was talking to other unions about forms of collective action. What do you make of that? Do you support some kind of collective action, and what would that look like?
It feels to me as though the Conservative government is right in that, to be honest, through their actions, through their words, the way that they aren't tackling the cost of living crisis, the way they haven't got a plan to control inflation, and critically, the way they haven't got a plan to grow the economy. I think all of us now have looked at the last 12 years at the stagnation in the economy, where we haven't seen the growth that really delivers a quality of life for working people, where people have seen their wages stagnate and people don't think that they're able to get on. That generational improvement that was a British promise, that if you work hard and roll your sleeves up, you can get on in life, has been denied people for the last 12 years, and people have absolutely reached the end of their tether. And it's for the Labour Party to offer an alternative, which is what we're doing. Our plan for government will see a fresh start for Britain. Changing the person at the top of the Conservative Party will not deliver the change this country requires. And it's very important that we keep focused on that. But it's for the government of the day, the Conservative Party, to deal with the cost of living crisis, to make sure that people can afford to put food on the table. Because if they don't, because they are going to naturally want a pay increase.
OK, and I want to ask you about the cost of living in just a moment, but what about this issue of collective action? We had John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor, on this programme yesterday. He was saying that he would back a general strike or coordinated action. So would you back one too?
I want to see strike action avoided at all costs. I don't think anybody wants to go on a picket line when they want to go and do a day's work, but people are forced to do that when the negotiations reach a position, a blockage. And so the question then is, well, what can the government do to remove that blockage, to get the trade unions around the table with the employer to try and negotiate a solution that works for working people? And when the government don't do that, but even worse, make it much harder on the sidelines when they're fanning the flames of dispute, doesn't help anybody. So I want to see all strike action avoided completely, because that's not what working people want. There's not a single person on that picket line that wouldn't rather be in work, but they cannot continue to feel the cost of living crisis where things are getting worse and not better. So the government do need to convene people, they do need to find a way through that, and they need to bring inflation under control to make sure that people aren't feeling the squeeze in the way that they are.
How do you keep inflation under control if you're paying higher wages?
But that isn't what's caused inflation that we're seeing today. These calls for higher wages are as a result of the cost of living crisis. They are not the cause of the cost of living crisis that we see today. Listen, my brief covers food and drink, which is essential for people. And we talk about gas and electric bills, we talk about council tax, national insurance and the rest. But I do think people feel the price of food increase acutely when they go to the supermarket and they're trying to balance the family finances. And increasingly, people can't buy the things that they used to buy. People are skipping meals. And actually, what I notice in my local supermarket is that the food bank donation basket on the other side of the till is far emptier than it was before, because people haven't got that headroom to be able to donate even to the local food bank. What could the government have done? They could have taken action on the fertiliser crisis. They could have taken action on the CO2 crisis. They could have taken action on the labour crisis, where we have labour shortages, which means that people are going hungry on one hand, but there is literally food rotting in the fields on the other. There are 40,000 pigs being culled because we haven't got the butchers in this country. And the cost of everything is going up for producers as well as retailers and consumers.
Well, yes, and energy bills are going up. The prediction is they'll go up even higher than we had thought. So what needs to be done about it? What's Labour's plan of action?
Well, we need our short-term plan, which is the windfall tax on oil and gas giants. We need not to make it worse than it already is, and that's why we voted against the national insurance increase that's really hitting families at a time when they need help, not more taxes going out of their wage slip. But we also need a long-term plan. Listen, there are too many homes in this country that are not insulated. That means that people are paying far more for energy than they otherwise would do, because the government have completely fallen back on the progress that was being made under the previous Labour government to make sure that homes were of a decent standard. If we're able to insulate homes, we'll save people hundreds of pounds a year on energy. We can reduce the amount of gas that we use by 15%. That reduces our dependence on Russian gas, for instance. But then also a really ambitious plan to make sure that we have new nuclear, new on and offshore, alternative fuel as well, to make sure that we have that long-term plan, because we are in this crisis for a reason. And the reason is that we have not invested in our communities, we have not invested in energy. And the benefit, of course, isn't just that we have less bills to pay in terms of gas and electric, it's creating those decent working class jobs in every one of our regions so Britain can grow and thrive together.
Jim McMahon, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.